So today I'm chatting with British writer and researcher Neil Sanders. He's qualified in film studies, media production and psychology, and he's also a qualified hypnotherapist, so I'm sure we're going to have a pretty good chat today. How are you doing today, Neil?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
Good to chat to you. So as you point out in your books, I've just finished reading your volume 2 of Your Thoughts Are Not Your Own, by the way. As you point out in your books, people often think of mind control as something that's done on an individual basis, a sort of one-on-one basis. But it's actually being done to all of us on a collective basis all of the time, and it has been pretty much from the moment we first came into the world, hasn't it?
Well, pretty much. I mean, the thing is, I mean, it's not really as sort of paranoid as it sounds, really, to assume that essentially there's a status quo, and they quite like the way that it is, and they like being in charge and stuff like that. So it's not unreasonable to assume that powerful people have consolidated their position and wish to maintain this position. And one of the particular ways that they do this is the setting of roles and the setting of norms through society. I mean, if you want to get down to the sort of the brass tacks of the academic nature of it, it's Edward Bernays or it's Walter Lipman, and it's either engineering or manufacturing consent, which is basically defining what is acceptable in society, defining what is normal behaviour, the way to act, and basically ridiculing anybody that seems to act out of that, or sort of really deriding them, or very, very publicly coming down on them like a ton of bricks as deviants. Anybody that sort of goes out of the normal sort of realms of society or starts questioning held beliefs or held structures of society, you're a deviant or you're a troublemaker or you're a dissident or something like that. And that's another aspect of mind control is the use of language, the very use of language. I mean, we could be termed as conspiracy theorists, but that in itself, I mean, George Carlin does an excellent bit about that. That since when did the concept of a conspiracy become something to ridicule? People conspire all the time. There is a crime against conspiracy to murder, conspiracy to commit fraud and such like that. So how is it so unusual, the concept that basically people in powerful positions would conspire to consolidate power? But that's the way that it's done. To quote George Carlin, you're a nut, you're a kook, you're a conspiracy buff.
Yeah. Very interesting point about the setting of norms in society as well, and what's deemed acceptable.
Yeah.
Everyone goes along with this, but it's always somebody else's norms and somebody else's idea of what's acceptable. It's never the general public that set these norms, and yet they go along with them unquestioningly in most cases. And just a few that occur to me. When you really look at these aspects of society and really break them down to their common core, they're completely ridiculous, and yet we put up with them. One is the concept of war, the idea that if you have a disagreement or a beef with another country, the way to resolve it is to bomb the shit out of them and to drop bombs on innocent civilians who are just called collateral damage. It's just one of those things. Most people in this country go along with the idea that we have to have wars to protect us and to keep us safe, because that's the lie that they've been sold. Mm-hmm. Then you have taxes. We all have to pay taxes. When you actually look at it, it's robbery.
Yes.
The establishment is taking money from you against your will, and they put you in jail if you object to it. And yet we accept this. It's completely outrageous, it's completely ridiculous, but because it's been sold and packaged to us as just one of those things, death and taxes, we all just accept it. And the other one, it occurs to me, is the royal family, the Queen. We in this country support one particular family on the basis of their genetics, their bloodline, and that alone. None of us can be king or queen. You can't be king or queen if you happen to be black or a person of colour. And you can't be king or queen if you happen not to be a Protestant Christian, or at least on the surface.
Let's just examine that concept of the royal family, what you've just said, the genetic disposition to be the rulers and such like that.
Yeah.
If you said basically, right, so the fact is, or the premise is, that because of their specific genetics or their specific DNA or their specific bloodline, they're entitled to something. Isn't that the flip side of saying that because of your genetics or your DNA or your skin colour, you're not entitled to something?
Yeah.
Because, essentially to me that seems the same thing. One particular element of society, genome or whatever you want to call it, gets favoured because of that. That appears to be the same principle as essentially you can't sit at the front of the bus because you're black.
It's an inherited. It's
systematic
wisdom,
injustice, and it's systematically. Well, I mean, it is the class system, obviously. It's an unfair distribution of wealth. It's ridiculous. I mean, there was this thing recently saying, the Queen is having to, she's almost bankrupt, or some nonsense or rubbish that was in the Daily Mail saying that she'd really felt the pinch of...
Well, sell a seabed or two then.
Well, this is the point. She's got 660,000 million acres. She's owns more land than anybody else on the planet. I have heard, I don't know if this is true, but that Prince Charles's conglomerate interest means that essentially he owns 75% of all the food that's manufactured and sold in the world. But again, it's concepts. It's this idea, like you said, basically this concept that's always been there, and so it will always be there. So nobody questions it. It's just like,
can you imagine? We've got this particular bloodline that's in place as royalty because it's been inherited over generations. But supposing it was announced tomorrow that Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins of Park Road, Stoke-on-Trent were going to be the new royal family. They were going to be elevated to this position of great wealth and power, going to be given palaces, and we all pay for it. I think the general public will probably say, well, who are these people? Why are they so special? Why is it Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins of Stoke-on-Trent? This is outrageous. We're not having this. But that's exactly what's happening with this one particular family. And because it's been done over generations, it's
and
acceptable.
The framing of it as well. This is it. It's the framing of it as an institution and as a real benefit to people as well. I mean, it's nonsense. That's one of the things that's so sort of oxymoronical about people that are very, very sort of royalist and consider themselves to be patriotic. It's been a long, long time since the royal family have actually been English. This German or Dutch or...
This is true.
Schleisberg Hesses, Saxe-Coburg Gothers and stuff like that. It again, it's a framing device, and it's nonsensical, really.
Wave a bloody German flag. At least it's more appropriate.
Well, exactly. I mean, it is very, very daft. But that's the point. It's framed in such a way that basically people have a misunderstanding, which is exactly the same sense as taxes. Because basically, if you say, I don't want to pay for this tax, or I don't want to pay for this tax, people say, well, why? You've got to. I've got to. And it's the sort of sheep mentality. That's how a sheepdog works. They don't essentially control the whole flock. The fear of being bitten makes the flock control itself, self-regulate, if you know what I mean. So if anybody acts up, it's the flock that goes, stop it, you're going to get us all into trouble. What are you doing?
You can't be different.
Exactly. But I mean, just the understanding of what taxes actually pay for, and the usual answer is everything. Taxes pay for everything, but they don't, because there's specific channels for different taxes, and what income tax actually goes towards paying is not what people. That's the one. Like what does income tax go towards pay for? And people say, it goes towards paying everything, roads, street lights, schools, and stuff. And no, it doesn't. Like there are separate delineations of tax that go towards covering that. As far as my understanding goes, income tax pays the interest on the debt to the banks. I don't know if that's strictly accurate. It's certainly what I've heard. But again, it's a perception. It's like you said, this has always been here. This is inherent. This is one of the things that you would never question. And then just to sort of tie it back to your very first point about war, I mean, that's a big topic because it involves a lot of mind control. It involves the mind control of two groups. The people who are actually going to go over there and do the killing, you've got to sort of train them, basic training, break them down, build them back up as a killing machine, get them to stab bayonets into sacks of flour and stuff, so that they can actually do these acts, which aren't, inherently sort of easy to a lot of people. And then there's the second group, which basically is the population who tacitly approve of it, not rejecting it, or by not protesting, and that can often be by very, very sort of broad sways. I mean, the Iraq War, there were a lot of people that realised that the WMD concept was nonsense, and that a lot of the stories that were coming out were propaganda, and they could actually see through this. But it was the concept that, Saddam is a bad guy. He's the butcher of Baghdad. He's la 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 la. So in a lot of people's mind, that alone justified it, because essentially we're going in there to get a bad man. And you know, the word collateral damage, that's from Tavistock. That is, it's to soften off war so that people don't understand the brutal, ugly reality of it. And you know, that if you said dead children, it hits home a lot more than if you say, oh, the collateral damage today was 1,000. But and again, it's all different structures that are all set up there to make it justified, and it's painting of pictures of manufacturing consent. With war, the position is usually that regardless of the lies and propaganda, etc., 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 we're still the good guys.
Yeah.
We might be misguided, and we might have maniacal leaders or something, but ultimately, on paper, we're the good guys. That's always how it's presented, because you couldn't really get people to fight anyway. This concept of the royal family and, you know, certain people just being elevated, I mean, this is slightly glib, but it ties into things like the X Factor and the American dream and, you know, getting on and becoming a success. Because if it can happen to them, it can happen to you. And so essentially they're your role model. And so the sort of justification for some people, and certainly, or the societal justification is, you can't criticize any of these people, because if you are criticizing these people, it's just because you're jealous, because you haven't achieved what these people have done, regardless of the massively staggered playing field or whatever. You know, it's still that sort of element that it's your fault.
Yeah, indeed. So you're a qualified hypnotherapist, and I'm sure with a lot of people, when you try and hypnotize them, a lot of people would probably say, oh, you can't get me, mate. No, I'm too smart for that. You can't hypnotise me. And it strikes me that it's kind of that way when you suggest that people are being mind controlled as well. On a mass basis. You get people saying, oh, they can't get me that way. I'm too smart and streetwise. I'm in control of my mind. But what's happening, of course, is that, like hypnosis, it's all done on a subconscious, subliminal level, targeting the subliminal mind. That's where it all goes on. And that's much harder to regulate unless you're fully aware of the tactics that are being used against you.
Well, I mean, there is no way of regulating it, because basically your subconscious mind has no critical analysis. Yeah. So basically, you know, that's how a lot of advertising this is how advertising and marketing strategies work, and all sorts of things, like as simple as just getting a celebrity to endorse a product. And on the face, consciously, you can understand that. You can see, like, this is a very obvious marketing strategy. You know, this is really, really obvious. I'm not going to fall for this. But your subconscious mind is watching this and going, you know, if I bought those trainers, I could be a little bit like Michael Jordan. So, you know, because it makes sense. Without the critical analysis, you're putting the 2 and 2 together and you're coming up with 4. Like, you know, he's a very special athlete. He's got this particular special type of equipment. It must have some purpose, otherwise he wouldn't use it. Well, if I use it, then maybe I can get some of that purpose. And yeah, I mean, that's certainly how it works. And people could, you know, you're affected in a number of ways that people don't realize. I mean, just a presentation of any artist or musician or anything on the front cover, it's all designed in a certain way to evoke certain feelings and to present an ideology. You know, you don't really know if that person's... I mean, this is the thing, you know, like Biggie Smalls, he's wearing Versace suits and he sat on a throne. He was flat broke when he died. Yeah. You know, one of the most talented artists ever, like in that milieu, and wasn't treated particularly nicely. So again, yeah, it is a subconscious thing, because a lot of these things consciously don't really make a lot of sense. Yeah. If these artists are really shipping all this cocaine about and stuff like that, why are they talking about it in their songs? Yeah. Why you know?
Why are they not in jail?
Yeah, exactly. How have you got the time to do this? You know, surely you've been on tour and such like that. Yeah. But you know, again, it's an idea that's sold to you. A lot of things are based on the concept of ideas, because really they don't hold that much water when you start to examine them too greatly. I mean, let's just say the concept of, like, you know, celebrity lifestyle. You can buy these certain products and make your house luxurious, your enormous house luxurious, and then you're doing well, aren't you? Well, maybe, but what people will find is that these products actually don't really seem, for some reason, they don't actually fill that void, not in the way that you expected it to do. And furthermore to that, you make a sort of lifestyle shift. You move up onto what could be called the next strata. More money, more problems. All of a sudden, you've got higher car payments, you've got higher monthly mortgage, you've got a bigger house, so it takes longer to clean it, etc., etc., etc. So all this added stress that you've got from it is defeating its own purpose, because the whole point of what you do, of buying that product or buying that house or elevating yourself to that sort of level, was to make yourself feel better. And lo and behold, it doesn't actually.
Yeah, and that's the power of the subconscious mind, which is where it all goes on. I mean, I quite often find myself humming a tune, and I'm sure this happens to all of us. And you suddenly become aware that you've got this tune going through your head, and you think, well, where's that come from? You think, oh yeah, I remember hearing it on that radio station this morning, or it was on that ad I saw earlier. And sometimes it's a tune that I hate. It's not even a record I like, and it's going through my head.
Well,
and that's the power of it. Yeah, and
that's the phrase that's used. I mean, this sound again. A lot of this sounds quite silly, but when people realised that, that's essentially what sort of led towards the ruination of hip hop to an extent. Because rather than, say, a complicated 8-bar sample, if you've got a nice 4-bar hook, and particularly if you've got a nice 4-bar hook that you've done on a keyboard, so you don't have to actually pay any release costs to the original artist.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, you can sell that as a ringtone. Like Soulja Boy made more money from ringtones than he's ever made from albums.
Ringtone rappers. There you go.
Lil Jon and 2 Chainz and all this. It's sort of tying in with that to an extent with the sort of southern type of hip hop. But that's the thing, the simplification of it, and the sort of there are numerous reasons for it that just so happen to sort of help other reasons, but it's usually for a sort of commercial basis, really.
Yeah, indeed. We'll get more into so-called hip-hop shortly.
Sure.
But I'm a DJ myself. I've been a DJ for over 20 years, and I used to make a joke about all this and just make light of it and have conversations with other DJs about it. And I wrote a book a few years ago and did a whole chapter on this. DJ requests. It occurred to me quite recently, now that I'm looking into all these other areas of research, that in my job as a club DJ, I get to see firsthand the results of mass brainwashing and sort of mind manipulation of the people in the comments that punters make when they come up to the DJ booth. And this really makes you understand that their thoughts aren't their own. So these days, people only ever ask for whatever's in the charts or whatever's on MTV rotation. It's generally the same 15 to 20 artists ever. Rihanna, Beyonce, Flo Rida, Pitbull, Jay-Z, Kanye West, all the rest, Lady Gaga. They won't dance to anything they don't know.
Yes.
And they actually call you a shit DJ if you try and push boundaries and get creative with the music and, serve them stuff they've never heard before. This didn't used to be the case. When I first started out 20 years ago, people would go and hear a DJ in a club, and they would take the view that this guy knows his music, this guy's going to take us on a journey, let's see what he's got for us.
That was the point, wasn't it, really? That's why the superstar DJ existed.
Yes, you'd say, Pete Tong's in town, let's go and listen to a Pete Tong set, let's see what he's got for us.
You wouldn't have gone up to Pete labels as well, wouldn't it? Because independent white labels. So.
Yeah, you wouldn't have gone up to Pete Tong and said, "Oh, Pete, can you play the #1 single in the charts?" But these days, people's idea of a great DJ is one that plays all the same tunes as everyone else in every other club, in every other high street, in every other town. And I've also noticed attention spans dwindling as well, to the point that if you don't change the record every minute and a half to 2 minutes, verse, chorus, switch, people start walking away, and you can see them. They pick up their phones and start texting and walk off. It's evidence of the instantaneous generation that wants everything right now and everything on their terms. And if that's not evidence of mass mind control, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. I mean, like, one of the things is that William Sargent, who was one of the first people, he published one of the first books on mind control, which is called Battle for the Mind, and he was the person that was involved in electroshock and LSD experiments and wiping people's memories in London at St Thomas's Hospital. He noted in his book that basically when he was looking into the concept of mind control or manipulation, like he was looking at the sort of religious ceremonies and sort of indigenous religious ceremonies, and he noticed that basically the combination of sometimes drugs, but always a sort of a rhythmical beating of drums, because essentially it affects your heart rate. That's why people dance to dance music, because the beat speeds up and you know, your heart goes along in time with it. That's why you nod to hip hop, and that's why you know, you sort of feel very aggressive to punk and metal and stuff, because the sort of the groove of it is what sort of catches you, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there is always that. I mean, what that is an example of is, we've got this thing called multi-screening and information overload, and it sort of ties into what you were saying before about the fact that people are flattered into believing that there's no way they could be fooled. Yeah. You know, because they're so informed, because they've got all these different channels of information.
Yeah.
I mean, even without getting into the fact that, you know, 95% of these outlets are owned by exactly the same 5 or 6 companies.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. The attention span thing comes from the fact that we're being bombarded with stuff, and the fact that you'd think that with more competition, that would basically mean that television channels, for example, would be sort of bound to make better programs, and you're going to see a sort of an increase of quality television and stuff, because obviously they've got all these rivals they need to compete. But what actually happens is basically they play it safe and go for the lowest common denominator and get the largest demographic share of the sort of viewing market.
Yeah.
And so instead you get a whole 500 channels of dreck. And then to sort of further tie that in, and I think iPods do this to an extent, which is why I've not got an iPod. If you sat there, I mean, everybody's done this. You sit there and it's like 9 o'clock or whatever, and you think, right, okay, what's on? There's nothing particularly that I want to watch on. It's an old episode of Friends. There's a Family Guy that I've seen before. All right, we'll watch this. And 5 seconds into it, you're looking around all the other channels, because you've got 500 channels available to you.
Yeah,
there must be something better than this. Do you know what I mean? And so it breeds that dissatisfaction. And I've seen people do this on their iPods as well. They put it on shuffle and it's like, oh, I don't want to listen to that. Oh, I don't want to listen to that. Oh, I don't want to listen to that. Oh, I don't want to listen to that.
They're doing the shuffle themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing when this is a really weird thing that happens, okay? You'll have a film on DVD, right? Scum was on the other night, okay? I've got that on DVD. I can watch that any time I want, but I just don't fancy it. But when it was on the telly, I thought, oh, brilliant, I'll watch this because it's on. Yeah. And it's that same psychological process. It's very strange. But the more choice you're given sometimes, it's kind of like an existential crisis. You know, it's the agony of decision. You've got all this stuff. And the problem is that none of it's brilliant. So you constantly think, yeah, but it's presented to you as, look at this, look at us. We live in the best of times. Can't imagine, like, oh, all those people from yesterday and all those years before, in like the 80s, when they were stupid and silly. Yeah. Like, you know, I could imagine that this is the finest of times, and woe betide anybody that doesn't live now, because they're missing out. And it's not necessarily true, but that's the excuse that's been used since the dawn of time. I mean, look at the Great Exhibition and other things like this. The point of those, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the 7 Wonders of the World, the whole point of this is to remind the populace that you're actually bloody lucky, right? Because this is brilliant. Now is great, yeah. So stop complaining, because, you know, it could be like it was backwards, which is strange, because then that's also combined with a sort of rose-tinted nostalgia of, oh yes, but society was kinder in the old days. And again, this isn't necessarily true. You know, it's not true. I forget who it was. I think I'm going to get this wrong, but it's 2 figures, historical figures like Plato and Socrates or something like that. And it's probably not those 2 people, but it was from ancient Greece. And in this text, they're talking about how teenagers today are so wild and unruly, and like they're going to be the death, and like they don't have respect for their elders like they did, and basically like this is the worst calamity that's ever happened. And that's always the case, basically, because you know, I mean, at one point, one reason that happens is because all of a sudden you don't become interesting to there's a shift in the sort of societal role. You move from being 20 to 30, and all of a sudden you're not economically viable to certain aspects, so they're not going to tell you about the new music or the new fashion, because A, you haven't got time, you've got kids and you're at work, and B, they want to snare new young kids for the market. So all of a sudden you've got this sort of alienation, and you feel sort of disparate and separate from what the kids are into. But that's all right, because basically they can market other things to you, basically, and they can also do that in a slightly sneering way of saying, oh, these kids and blah blah blah. So it's, you know, it's a shifting of roles. But this is not new. This has never been new. There's always been sort of depictions of roles, and the clever thing about it is like you say, it is done on a subconscious level, and people just assume that that's always the way it is, and that's the way that it should be. Why do people buy blue for boys and pink for girls? Just because that's the way it is, you know. That's the thing. But as I say, you know, pink, for example, it used to be an incredibly feminine colour, and now it's not. You know, it's actually becoming more and more masculine, because you know, you're getting the sort of, again, Cameron and Dipset with popularising pink, and then you're getting other artists doing it, and then you're getting, you know, pink in fashion wear and such like that. So, yeah, it's strange how these things can change.
Yeah, really. And in 20 or 30 years, they'll probably be making TV shows about I remember 2013. People will be saying, "Oh, look at what we used to wear then, and look at the bloody technology we used then. Wasn't it crazy how we used to live?"
Well, I mean, fashion itself that's another thing. It's always sold as organic, but is it any? You can just track back any historical. This is this sort of separation, this cognitive dissonance in people. You can look at, say, Russian propaganda, or you can look at Middle Eastern news, and you can go, "Oh, that's so biased. Oh, that's ludicrous." But you don't tend to apply that same logic to the things that you're presented with all the time, because they're basically right up against your face. But look, let's just look at anything. Ruffs. Why was everybody wearing ruffs at a certain point in, you know, Victorian England or whatever? Then, you know, codpieces. There's always been a fashion that is dictated, and mysteriously this fashion sort of tends to go worldwide. Now, that's not some bloke that's come out one day and gone, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wear a codpiece today." And then that somebody was walking past, like the Elizabethan equivalent of Versace was walking past and went, "Yeah, I can sell shed loads of them." Like, it's not how it works. It's presented. You see at the New York Fashion Week or whatever, essentially, look, next year everyone's going to be wearing skinny jeans. We've said it. That's all we're going to be producing. And then mysteriously, you can't buy baggy jeans anymore or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's not an organic thing. It's been dictated, but it is sold as an organic thing. That's what's so crazy, because it's very clever, because the skinny fit jeans, for example, that kids are wearing now is a direct response to, say, the baggy jeans that 90s kids were wearing. Yeah. But the kids now thinking it's their own, not understanding that there's two things. There's the dichotomy and the sort of, like, the paradox of a uniform individuality. And there's another thing, that basically skinny fit jeans are prevalent in every single genre of music at present. So they're not distinct to metalers or punks. Yeah. They're
Drake's wearing them.
Oh, for God's sake, and Lil Wayne, and wearing jeggings and leopard print jeggings and stuff like that. It's you know. Yeah. But again, this is a dictation of fashion. Yeah. It comes from the celebrity back onto the thing, and then, you know.
It's shocking to think that in 20 years, today's kids that will be grown up then, will be looking back and saying, "Oh, do you remember 2013? Nicki Minaj, oh, she was great. Lil Wayne, he was fantastic." Jesus God, the thought of that.
Well, yeah.
Anyway,
I mean,
that's just
me. But that's another thing. This is the sort of, it's a saturation of a market. There's no way that those artists could fail, because there is such a huge system and so much money behind them that, you know, they will tail off, because, as I say, the problem is that your audience gets older and such like that. But it's sold as so enormous. Jay-Z, there's no way Jay-Z can fail, because he's got this image behind him, this portrayal, and it ties into sort of certain psychological instincts that you have, that particularly when you're sort of in your formative years and stuff like that, you want to be associated with winners, you know, because these winners are doing well. And again, it's like the sort of celebrity endorsement thing. If I very much observe these characters and I can figure out how they've achieved this, and I can in some way replicate that, then I can in some way be like them. And, you know, and maybe in the future, if I take down enough and you know, figure out the tricks and the rules to this game, then I can succeed in the same way that they've succeeded.
Yeah. I remember in 2008 somebody was saying to me, there's this new artist that's due to come out called Lady Gaga, and she's going to be the next big thing. She's going to be, you know, really big. And I just remember thinking at the time, how do you know? Yeah. How can you know that she's going to be the next Madonna when she hasn't even put a single out yet? Because it was deemed, and it was written that she was going to be the next big artist. It had been decided by the corporations behind her that she was going to be the next big superstar, and of course she was. And even before she came out, people were saying, oh, she's going to be the next big thing. I know this because I've been told.
Well, I mean, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because that's the hype machine, isn't it? But then also, I mean, you must know this because of your sort of DJing work. This is very, very sort of... It's basically like payola. It still exists because you'll get a certain record label will have an artist to push, and they'll have cross-contamination on the board level with certain radio stations and certain television outlets and stuff like that, and so they'll be able to position their artist to get played a lot on the radio, for example, or whatever. The more you get played on the radio, because of the PRS, the more money you get, because every time it's played, they owe you some money for the playing of your music. The more it's played, the more people hear it.
Yep.
The more people hear it, the more people are likely to go out and buy it or download it or whatever. Yep. The more people that hear it, buy it, or download it, the better it does in the charts. So the more it's on the radio. The more it's on the radio, the more money they make. The more money they make, the more they can pump into advertising it. And so it's a very cyclical thing like that.
Yeah.
And it's a hugely complicated business model that people have really, really thought out. And it's like the Lady Gaga. I forget, there was an autobiography I was reading recently. I think it might have been in Prodigy from Mobb Deep. He went to a record executive thing, and they were showing him Lady Gaga and saying basically this girl's going to be huge. I could have got that completely wrong, but it was definitely in a biography I was reading recently.
Mm-hmm.
And Lady Gaga's the one because basically they just completely changed her. They stole it off this woman called Lena Morgana, essentially, and like cultivated her image. She went to school with Nicki and Paris Hilton. She's not a sort of down low, Lower East Side ruffian, used to take loads of drugs and listen to disco music and be outrageous. That's the character that she essentially stole her identity from. And she doesn't really write her music. Red One writes the majority of her music, and Robert Fusari is the person that should be getting the money from him, because they're the people that are behind the construction of her, the construction of her image. No doubt she can play the piano and she can hold a tune or whatever. I mean, this is the other thing that's really strange, because people say, oh, it's crap though, isn't it? This music, it's rubbish. It's not. It's brilliantly constructed. It's constructed in a scientific manner. There are agencies that you can go to in LA, and just by the sonic definition of certain songs, they can tell you whether that's going to be a hit or not.
Yeah, it's all algorithms and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you might know. I don't know what the term is for this, but Iron Maiden use it all the time. There's a way that you can basically go from a low pitch to a high pitch, and it goes la like that, and so it does a sort of tick-shaped drop and raises, and that. Basically, that's in every Iron Maiden song ever. Bruce Dickinson's a master at doing that. But that really resonates. It's like a tribal thing. It's like an instinctual thing that makes you sort of raise your hackles and go, oh yeah, and it draws you into it. I mean, somebody like Katy Perry, for example, they basically gave her so many cracks at, so many bites of the cherry. She was on the Warped Tour, the Vans Warped Tour first, which is a skate punk festival. Why? Because she was doing a slightly different take on what she was doing. And then they changed to marketing, and then they changed it again. And what they're going to do is eventually they're going to make her, or they're going to give you the impression that she's not this pop princess, but she's some sort of diva.
That happened with Kylie Minogue, didn't it? There was a point where she was being marketed as this indie sort of chick, and she was doing tunes with Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Yeah.
What makes me laugh about Kylie Minogue is that the thing that made her famous is her arse in that video. And it's not her. That's a body double.
Yeah.
Apparently, yeah. I've read it's a body double was used in that video. So again, it's ludicrous, this idea. I mean, that's another thing that happens in films all the time. There's one specific girl that's been Britney Spears and Kylie Minogue and Christina Aguilera and all these different people in various videos. But it's like an industry secret. Yeah. I was watching Stuart Lee the other day. He's a very good comedian, English comedian, and he was explaining that basically certain very prevalent comedians within the English television who are still quite funny, like Frankie Boyle was one that he mentioned, though he said that this wasn't as used as much. Jack Whitehall, Michael McIntyre, Rod Gilbert, all these people that sort of do the sort of Live at the Apollo, BBC stuff and all this, John Bishop and all these sort of safe middle-of-the-road comedians. Yeah. And he's got friends that he went to Oxford with that now work as writers, joke writers, for these artists.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon. I mean, like Bob Hope never wrote a single joke. I know it's not quite the same. He was just a performer, and possibly to hide the fact that he was a spy, if you believe certain people. But yeah, this is the point. The image of celebrities that is presented to you is very, very, very fake. He's not to be taken the most seriously, but there was a blog that was put out by Fred Durst of Limp Bizkit, basically at the time when hot dog, starfish and hot dog flavored water was doing really well, and they were huge everywhere. And he did this sort of blog or an interview where he's basically saying, look, everyone thinks this is brilliant. I'm in the video, I'm in this Bentley, I've got all these beautiful girls surrounding me, and I've got this all this nice clothes on, I look like a superstar. And when this video shoot's finished, I'm going to go home alone, I'm going to sit there alone for the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to cry myself to sleep every night. And this is completely contradictory to the image that is presented.
Ready meal for one.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, there's another very, very sort of good thing. Again, Dame Dash explains. He says, all right, let's just examine what $1 million record deal is. Aside from the fact that that's a loan that people don't realise, particularly in the hip-hop industry, first thing you're going to need is a house, because everyone knows you're rich, so you can't be staying like where you used to stay, because you're going to get robbed. And also, you've got an image to present. Then you're going to need a car, then you're going to need some jewellery. Then you're going to actually need to pay taxes, so a certain amount of that's gone already. Then you're going to need to do this, and this, because you've got to keep all your boys sweet around you and stuff like that, maybe buy them some jewellery, because you need a posse, because that's the other thing. You can't be seen as weak in this milieu. But that's before we've even started promoting your album, recording your album, promoting you as an artist, flying you to New York to do interviews on the breakfast show, flying you over to LA to do interviews over there and stuff like that. Yep. That's all paid for out of your £1 million advance or record contract.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they are financing a project, not you. You are an element of that project. They're financing a project, and the contract is set up in a way that they can't really lose, because if you sell and you do well, you get a measly amount. I was watching something the other day about Run DMC. They got something like 71 cents split between three of them for every record sold. Jam Master Jay was not doing particularly well financially when he was murdered. Again, this is outrageous, because these are really brilliant artists that deserve to do well, but they didn't do particularly well off the music.
Yeah.
Strange, very strange. And the point that Dame Dash is making is essentially this $1 million record deal that you've got. I mean, this is hip hop, and it's a particular type of hip hop artist, so it's not necessarily accurate for everybody. But basically, you're going to be about $250,000 in the hole before you've even started, and there's no guarantee of success. And then you can get into the other things, like, say people go, oh wow, $1 million album deal, 5 albums, that's amazing. Never sign that, right? Because what a 5-album deal means is that you owe this company 5 albums, but they have no obligation to record those 5 albums. So if your first album dies, right, then tough, you're on their roster forever. You can't buy your way out of the contract unless you want to spend incredible amounts of money, and you can't perform music, or you can't write new music and put out new music, because you're owned by this company.
Yeah, literally owned. I
mean, that's what happened to even very, very prominent artists like Mariah Carey and George Michael. Got locked into it. I mean, even Lou Reed got locked into it. I mean, he basically got out of it by doing Metal Machine, which was just a nonsense album. But I don't think you can do that anymore. I think there are also obligations that you have to provide a certain amount of commercial success. They expect to get to be reimbursed on their investment, and they expect to be reimbursed incredibly well. I mean, look at who's making the money out of a genre. And it's not the artists, often.
And it strikes me that if it's not one particular artist at the top of their tree, there's always another one there to take their place. So, for instance, Jay-Z has been the #1 hip-hop artist for forever, for God knows how many years. But if it wasn't Jay-Z, it'd be somebody else. It's not about Jay-Z, it's about that #1 position being available. Jay-Z just happens to be filling that position.
Well, I mean,
but if something happened to him tomorrow, they'd stick somebody else there, and you got a new top dog in hip hop. It's not about the individual; it's about the positions being filled. It strikes me.
What's it called? Professor Griff of Public Enemy suggests that basically Jay Prince, Suge Knight, Dame Dash, and Irv Gotti were going to join together to make a distribution company. And
I've heard that, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if this is true. This is what I've heard from Professor Griff's videos. I've never met Blake. He was saying that it's very suspicious that the IRS raided all 4 of these people and made them all ineffective for a certain period of time. And it was at that time that Jay-Z managed to sidestep I mean, that was a very strange thing as well, when he was supposed to have stabbed Don Rivera and it blatantly wasn't him that did it, and everybody knew who did it and stuff like that, but he was still to put up. I mean, you could make the argument that maybe he was being tested, or who knows, but yeah, it's very strange. I mean, I'll just to say this, like, there's that new program, isn't there, the Founding of America, the Oliver Stone thing that's going on, and one of the quotes that's made on the advertisement for it is, "No man can make $1 million honestly," and I think that's probably true.
Yeah, it would appear to be the case. Yeah. So, looking at the current glut of so-called hip-hop artists, inverted commas used today, to what extent do you see many of the prominent ones being used for mind control and manipulation of the perceptions of young people? Because that's what we're talking about.
Well, I mean,
getting them young.
It's simplifying it. That's one of the things that, I mean, we spoke about this in relation to the sort of earworms and ringtone beats and stuff like that. But there's a real lowering of the tone of like a lack of lyricism and like particularly artists like Chief Keef and stuff like that, and 2 Chainz and French Montana. It's real bad stuff. It's good. It's like you were saying earlier. It's good club music. People want to dance to it and go, "Oh yeah, this is amazing," but there's no substance or content to it. Yeah. And the other thing there's 2 other things essentially. One thing that I've noticed is at the minute is a real prevalence for promotion of MDMA or Molly.
Yeah, Molly. Yeah.
And you know what's really strange about it? It's obviously this is not a new drug. This was, it's connected to raves and stuff like that.
About it in 1988 in Britain. They've just caught up with it in the US.
Well, what's strange though is, when it was being talked about in Britain, it was acid house and it was a love-based drug. It was a love and dancing drug. Yeah. Molly is a date, rape, and sex drug in hip hop. That's what it's there for. Basically, there's no talk about camaraderie or getting together with a load of blokes and hugging with your shirt off or any of this stuff that basically that it used to be sold on. It's now either sold in songs like Rick Ross's "You Ain't Even Know It," like
put it in a champagne.
And she ain't even know it. Like, and or alternatively, it's just in songs like I dropped a Molly and I'm sweating or whatever. But it's that hypersexuality. It's sold as like, it's like catnip for women. It's like, give her a bit of this and you'll be fighting her off with a stick. Yeah. But the other thing that's sort of irritating at the minute is this has always been prevalent with all artists. I mean, Frank Sinatra's manager paid girls to scream. The Beatles' managers paid girls to scream. Okay, there's always been bought audiences, and this goes into the sort of film thing as well. When Tom Cruise, there was recently he was promoting Mission Impossible 3, I think it was, or 4, or one of the Mission Impossibles in India, or one of his films, and basically there was a huge crowd there to meet him and they were all chanting his name and stuff like that, and this was shown on the news, and a journalist who was there at the time was asking people, "Do you know who this guy is?" "No, we've got no idea. We've been paid 30 quid to come here and stand and read and shout this name off this board." And so it's the concept of he's boosting his ego. It's also boosting the idea of him as an entity being successful, because film stars are a project in the same way that the music stars are.
Do you think the likes of Tom are in on it? Do they actually believe these people are screaming their name because they love them, or do they know it's all a scam?
I mean, these people aren't stupid and they understand the game. So it's very difficult to say whether, how much of it is fake and how sort of aware of it they are. Yeah. The sort of what's very irritating at the minute is they're doing all this sort of drug kingpin nonsense again, like and not particularly well. Like, there's always been comparisons to drug kingpins and stuff like this, but all this Rick Ross and Jeezy and stuff like this, it's not believable. And we were talking before we came on air. One of the stupidest things that like Rick Ross says is basically, "Oh yeah, Manuel Noriega. I know him personally, and he owes me favors." And then he quantified that in an interview, saying, "Well, I've never actually met him, but I knew some guy that was in a cell 3 doors down from him." And I started thinking about that. I said, "I bet that's not true," because obviously Rick Ross was a CO, like worked in a prison and basically.
Well, he probably used to serve his meals, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. This was I was thinking, or basically was in a prison, worked in a prison.
Correctional Officer Roberts.
Well, this is what's so ludicrous. I mean, he's basically taken freeway Ricky Ross's identity.
Yeah.
And, that's a whole other story connected to the Iran-Iraq-Contra and the Dark Alliance. And he was basically, freeway Ricky Ross was dealing directly with the sort of Nicaraguan drug connections that were being sponsored by the CIA to finance the Iran-Iraq war. And then through him and a gentleman called Michael Harris, or Harry O., they were the most sort of prolific importers of cocaine and spreaders of crack within the sort of black communities of America. Harry O was the chief financier of Death Row Records. So it all sort of goes round and round and round and round. And what was Death Row Records promoting? Gangster lifestyle, selling crack, being a gangster, just, again, predictive programming.
Yeah.
Putting it in that works both ways, because it's horrible, really, because basically you're showing to a certain demographic that this is a way that perhaps you could make your situation better, and on the other time you're terrifying another demographic, basically white America, so that they fear young black people, and then that sort of builds on itself to the point where these young black people are not being given a fair shot. There's racism and stereotypes and stuff like that, to the point where they say, well, you know what, if you think I'm a gangbanger, I'll show you a gangbanger. I'm going to bang harder than anybody, bloody. And so that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
And so that's what it's so stupid about all these blatant like falsehoods from Ricky Ross, and particularly. I mean, you've got artists like Nicki Minaj, who's for some reason has always got her tits out now, like on everything that she does. Like it's like, oh, come on. And she's sold as beautiful as well. And maybe I'm looking at the wrong girl, but like,
well, no, I beg to differ on that one as well, mate. Yeah.
Well, fair enough. Good. It's not just me then. But
I mean, I doubt she knows what bloody planet she's on most days.
She just screeches like a harpy. Like, and she's another one that basically she's not got a consistent style. She's actually a very talented rapper, although she did steal her image from Little Kim. Like, she can rap. She's very, very good, but then she does all this Starship nonsense and stuff like that. And it,
from Starships to all these hardcore tunes, "Kiss My Arse and My Anus Because It's Finally Famous," and
I know it's strange. But again, you throw the web wide enough, and you're going to catch as many as you can. But I mean, what is so silly is that these artists keep getting shown up again and again and again. Ricky Ross denies he's a CEO. DJ Vlad exposes him. To be fair, like Rick Ross then made his goons beat Vlad up and make him drink a champagne glass full of his piss. But that's about as gangster as he's ever got. And and even the concept of like, it's not a good thing to be a gangster or a drug dealer. That's one of the things that really sort of like confused me about that.
It's when madness, isn't it? Like Snoop Dogg being a pimp and saying, "Yeah, I'm a pimp." Isn't it great? No, it's not.
When he got dropped from Reebok for basically insinuating that he might rape a girl, I mean, aside from the fact that is, again, they were acting like he was the first person to say that. That's not a new thing in hip-hop. Like, you can find, like, numerous...
Eminem talked about it all the time.
It's not uncommon. Like, it's on the first CNN album. Like, duct taping her, tie her up, raping her, send you the videotape. It's not an uncommon thing to be used, because you're talking about a gangster sort of lifestyle, whether it's true or not. It's the genre. But what sort of really confused me about that was they're dropping him because he's claiming to date rape a girl. His whole image is he's a murderer. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that it's not a despicable thing to say that you're going to rape a girl, but he's built his entire career on saying I shift massive amounts of drugs and I kill anybody that gets him away. Yeah. Like, they were okay with that.
Exactly.
Like, it's just strange. And
I call it selective morality, because they'll highlight a lyric like that and let so many others go. All these disgusting... just negative lyrics that you're getting in hip-hop records these days, are just allowed to slip through the net, and they'll just focus on one particular one. You can't say that. Like Kanye West, what was it, on Yeezus? He's talking about some lyric about going down on Asian women, and the Asian community got all upset about that. I was thinking, listen to the rest of the album. What he's bloody saying? He's talking about Satanism and all sorts, and you're just letting it go.
Well, I mean, it's the normalisation of things as well. Basically, people don't sort of assume that it's because obviously people live vicariously through artists and sports teams and all sorts of things because it's exciting, but this sort of the free and easy way that basically like artists sort of talk about, I've been to jail, blah 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 blah. It's a very different experience when you get there. You suddenly discover, I've got a chopper in the boot of my car and blah blah blah. That's odd, Rick, because you didn't have it when the gangster disciples shot up your car for basically overstepping the mark and claiming things that aren't associated with you. But it's ludicrous. It really is. Like, there has been a real shift away from lyricism and any type of social commentary or any type of positive message.
Exactly.
To real, and I don't mind it. I like nasty. I like Mobb Deep and stuff like that. That's perfectly okay. I don't like Rick Ross and stuff because I just think it's basic. I think it's really bad music, to be quite honest. Like, and there are artists out there like Immortal Technique and various people like that are still doing very good, clever lyrics and good, clever production and stuff like that. But it sells an image to kids, particularly young impressionable kids that come from an area where they don't get a lot of love, social support, education, opportunity. It sells an image that seems so achievable and stuff like that. And what's really irritating is that basically that's the point of it. It's a marketing strategy. Again, I'm not saying you should censor this and stuff like that, but it's done in such a, it's not what we meant to do. Oh no, we're not glamorizing it. Oh God, no, of course not. Of course we're not glamorizing it. How are you not glamorizing it? You're wearing a mink coat with a golden AK-47 on the front of your album. Like, how could you glamorize it any more?
Yeah.
And again, I've got no particular problem with the milieu or the genre or stuff like that, but I just think it's very, very cynical. It's about conspicuous consumption and immediate pleasures, and it's just basic. It's just base at the minute. That's the problem with a lot of hip hop.
Yeah, really. Another area that interests me besides music is the use of Hollywood movies for predictive programming and planting of subliminal messages and that sort of thing. I know you look into that as well. Could you maybe give us a few examples that you've uncovered of some of the strange stuff that has been implanted into movies to generate a certain sort of psychological reaction in the audience?
Well, I mean, we'll go on a basic one, really, is music. Like, the two most prominent soundtracks that you could probably think of, or most famous, is Jaws and Psycho.
Yeah.
And they use the very high-pitched squeal or the very low rumble, and what that's supposed to do is replicate or imitate animal sounds, either like a growl in the case of the Jaws score, or a high-pitched shriek, like maybe like an owl or something, or sounding like an animal in pain in Psycho. And the other thing is that they use sort of dissonance, and they use tension. They use sort of they build tension and then release, and build tension and release by which particular notes that they're actually using in a scale. But that's a very, very prevalent thing. That's why a film score is there. A swell is there when the two main characters kiss. Because it builds on that thing. I mean, essentially, it's a kind of hypnosis, because people ask, what is hypnosis? And all hypnosis is really is a very, very pleasant state of relaxation where your subconscious mind can be accessed directly. And it's going into daydream or driving along and realizing that you've missed your off ramp. Yeah. But it's okay because the autopilot took hold. And that's the same thing that happens when you get engrossed in a film. If you've ever cried at a film, you've been subject to a very mild hypnosis, because you know that girl's not really dead. Like, she's an actor, but it has been conveyed in such a way that it's bypassed your logical, critical analysis, and you've succumbed to the emotion of the piece. And things like music, they work in a number of ways in films. Like, one way is that they actually just basically block up your brain. Your brain's got a finite amount of sort of information it can take in, and so if there's music going on as well as other stuff, then you've only got a certain amount of thinking space left, and that's why they use music in shopping centres to basically just fill your brain and make it even more confusing, so that you sort of succumb to impulse buying.
Yeah.
But in films, as I say, it paints an idea. You can tell somebody's a bad guy the second he comes on screen, because they'll zoom in on his eyes and the music will go dun dun dun, and everybody goes, so he's the bad guy. Oh, brilliant. Okay, I can understand that. There's certain conventions and signs and signifiers that we can decode, but they're sort of presented in a certain way that again, it's a constructed way. Some of them are archetypal, some of them are basically societal things where, big handsome blonde geezer, he's the hero or whatever. Usually he's like an ugly, it's strange the amount of times that you give a bad guy a physical deformity.
Yeah,
like a
James
scar
Bond style.
Yeah, exactly. But there are ways that you can make even a villain more attractive. You can give him a very esoteric hobby, like Joker in the Tim Burton's Batman. He's into art. He's clever, isn't he? This sort of genius villain guy.
Cultured,
yeah. Gary Oldman in Leon. He's listening to classical music whilst he's going around and murdering people. So it's like, fair enough, and it's that sort of concept of the intellectual European that was in the Die Hard films and all of this sort of stuff. Yeah. Like, there are things that you can do to make you like the villain. Like, but again, these are Hollywood conventions. Another one, this is used in Disney, is if you want a character to be liked, you give them a tiny little button nose and huge eyes. And again, it's because basically it's an instinctual drive. It reminds you of a baby, and so you're sympathetic. You're naturally maternal, paternal, whatever you want to call it, and so they actually respond to it. And then there's more nefarious things. I mean, the obvious one is the use of the military, and the use of films to make the military look sexy. And there are things like Top Gun, Zero Dark 30, Hurt Locker. These are all recruitment tools. These are all blatantly recruitment tools. And then you've got other films like The Siege, Courage Under Fire, True Lies, Executive Decision, and they very handily tell people who've never gone out of their front room about geopolitics, who the bad guys are in the world. Oh, it's Muslims, isn't it? It's Islamic fundamentalists, and they're likely to walk into a restaurant and blow themselves up, just like they did in that Steven Seagal film. It's not Russians anymore. It's okay. We're all right. They've stopped telling us that Russians. Rocky sorted that out. So if we can get it together, then all can get together, and I don't mind that you killed my friend. So that's how it works. This is where people get that. It's like we were saying earlier about the pictures that are painted in people's heads. If you've never been to Egypt, you know what the Sphinx looks like because you've seen it, but perhaps you don't understand the dimensions of it, how big it is, sort of where it is in relevance to the pyramids or whatever. That's not a criticism. It's just how else could you? But this is the problem. This is where you get a lot of racism, bigotry, homophobia, and all this nonsense. It's because it's an informed view of something that nobody's ever really come up to terms with. They've got an idea from stereotypes or from informed information from other people that have got it from informed sources and stuff like that. So it's very strange. The point about the use of the military in films is that essentially you can use their equipment. You can arrange to hire equipment from the US military, certainly, and this is probably the case for other militaries as well. Certainly there seems to be an incredible quid pro quo going on with Top Gear and the British military. They often have, very, very massive machines and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's a very subtle way of saying, cool, look at that. I could be in one of those if I was in the military.
Yeah.
But so you can use it in say Hollywood productions and stuff like that. But the rule is they get final rewrite of the script. And so in a series of John Woo films, James Bond films, John Wayne films and the like, films like not Meatballs, Stripes, and various other Iron Man, Transformers, they've all got the backing of the military, which means that basically you can use their equipment, but you can't say anything that's detrimental to the military, and that film has to in some way be beneficial for recruiting.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, this is the thing, and people don't realise that. I mean, Iron Man's a very good one because it basically, it not only again makes the sort of military look sexy and stuff like that, but it portrays them as the good guys in the end because they finally get on Tony Stark's side. But it also sort of has the concept of fundamentalist Islamic terrorists as well.
Yeah,
it's in there as well, you know. So there's you could. I mean, it's not even a theory; it is a fact. I mean, and they get quite nefarious with it. Zero Dark 30 and Hurt Locker by Catherine Bigelow. I mean, that's so obvious that she's actually received classified information, and the reason it's obvious is because senators complained about it. It's a fact. It's in the public domain. But the CIA and the U.S. military maintain to this day that they had no involvement with the production of those two films, which is, it's provably not true, because otherwise she wouldn't have had the access to those documents. And probably, I think you'll probably find that a lot of the equipment that was used in it was again hired directly from the Department of Defense, which goes against what they say. So in that's a wonderful piece of propaganda, because it basically fulfills all the things that they wanted to do. Say how cool the military is, say how sexy the military is. It also basically shows that torture is useful, and it also shows that the CIA do it and there's nothing you can do about it, so be afraid. And it also, for example, in Hurt Locker, hyped the concept of the belly bomb, or the so-called belly bomb, you know, stitching a bomb inside somebody. So that led on to that's a real situation, is it? We best have these X-ray machines in airports.
Came along just at the right time, that film.
Exactly, it's odd, that, isn't it? But but at the same time, they get to stand there and go, no, this is nothing to do with us. No. I mean, we appreciate what the young lady's done, but I think she's misunderstood us. So they get to have the cake and eat it too with those particular examples. I mean, Top Gun, just to sort of explain the power of these films. The day after Top Gun came out, 1 million people joined up to either the Air Force or the Navy.
Madness. What do you make of the Bourne films starring Matt Damon? Because there's a hint there in the Bourne character himself that he may have undergone what we've come to understand as MK mind control treatment at the hands of the CIA. And when you look into this subject area and then you go and watch those films, there seems to be a very clear indication at what's being hinted at in the plot. And I just wonder whether you think they do this so that researchers who genuinely look into MK and other similar techniques, if you want to call them that, can be dismissed as fantasists that watch too many movies and need to get out a bit more.
Yes. I mean, that's it gives the plausible deniability, doesn't it? Because again, if nobody else has got, if the only knowledge that people have got of these techniques comes from the films The Manchurian Candidate, excuse me, and the Bourne Identity, or the Bourne trilogy, then the only knowledge that they have of it is in the realm of science fiction. And so this is the point: who paints that picture? Until they're shown the documents and whatnot, and even when they are shown the documents, because they're coming from a completely different position, it takes a while to sort of come around to that point. I certainly took that from the Bourne films, particularly in the last one where they're doing the water torture to him, where it shows the sort of the origins of his training and whatnot. I actually thought they were very good films. Well, they were, yeah. You know, there's also the sort of elements of the espionage things. You know, the bit where he's telling him how to avoid the cameras on the platform in the train station and such like that. So, you know, very, very, very sort of intricately done. But as you said, they do give that plausible deniability. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., all of this sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's even before you get into the sort of painting of certain events. Like the two events that are basically painted and in ways that never had. Like Son of Sam murders and the Charles Manson case. Like, there's innumerate films about both of those things, often sort of hidden behind schlocky horror titles and such like that. Sometimes not. Sometimes, like The Manson Family or Helter Skelter.
You've got the Summer of Sam, Spike Lee film.
Yeah, exactly. But they portray supposed facts about the case that aren't accurate. That just really aren't accurate at all, and you can use films to really shift people's perception. There's a film that was on last night called The Wee Man, and it's about Robert Ferris, I think. It's a gangster involved in the ice cream wars in Glasgow, and I was deciding whether to watch it or whatever, so I went on IMDb looking at all the reviews and stuff like that, and one of the things said is be aware that this was written with the cooperation of the main character, so it's incredibly biased towards him and paints him as more of a Robin Hood character rather than the villain that he was. And so even something as simple as that just shows you how perceptions can be altered. And then imagine if you've got the sort of infinite budget of the military behind that.
Reminds
Independence Day was another one. I mean, that the people wouldn't assume that was utilised as an advertisement for the military, because it's just a fun space aliens film, isn't it? But that's the point of it, isn't it?
Yeah. Reminds me of what you were saying about Whitewashes, the Notorious film about Notorious B.I.G.
Oh, God.
And you look at the credits, executive producer one Sean Combs, a.k.a. Puff Daddy. The depiction you get of Puff Daddy in the movie and the role that he played in Big's life could be just a little bit kind of manipulated, don't you think?
It altered several things. He didn't explain why Sean Puffy Combs actually was fired from his first job, because he and Heavy D put on a concert at a school, and they oversold the tickets and some kids died.
Yeah.
And it was blatantly, or it certainly appeared to be.
They left that bit out, didn't they?
Yeah, they seemed to leave that bit out. They seemed to leave all the stuff out about Shine and the way that he just completely rolled on him. I mean, one of the things that they didn't talk about, certainly in the film, is that's one of the reasons that Biggie Smalls was broke, is because you use Sean Puffy Combs' studio, he's going to charge you for that. You use the equipment in his studio, he's going to charge you for that. You've got to use his in-house producer, but he's going to charge you from that. He gets an executive producer credit. That's why on every single song that's on the Bad Boy roster, in the background you've got P. Diddy goes,
right.
Bad Boy. Thanks, that's 30 seconds of your life. He gets a writer's credit for that, and he gets a performer's credit for that.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. You then in the doing the video, Hypnotize, for example, 7 million. Okay, that comes directly out of his pocket, Biggie Smalls' pocket, but he wasn't told that until after the fact. All the clothes, etc., everything that's in the thing. His Bentley, Puff's Bentley, was in that. Not only did he charge for that, but he was able to write that off as a tax deductible thing for his company. And so this is the point. All this money is going out and going out and going out, and you swindled every way up. I mean, again, these artists basically made a very, very small amount of money off compared to the record labels.
Yeah. Sean Puffy Combs, not a man you'd want to be on Judgment Day.
No.
Anyway, moving on. On the subject of hypnosis, this is a bit of a wild card question, but I just wonder what you make of Derren Brown, because when a lot of people think of hypnosis, they think of Derren Brown. He's the best known character in that field. I don't know if you know him personally, but there's a couple of points I want to raise about him, but I just wondered what your overall impression was of his work, what he does.
It's quite entertaining. Some of it I prefer more than others. I'm not particularly into magicians and that sort of thing, because it just irritates me, because I just sit there and go, well, how's he done that then? Well, I've got to figure it out. And then obviously you never can, so it just winds me up. It's quite good. I mean, he uses a variety of techniques, NLP and subliminals and various stuff, and he's incredibly talented at it. Some of it, this is the other thing that's strange about Derren Brown, is he mixes reality-based tricks with editing tricks. For example, like the one where he did Russian roulette, that was done through they edited it. It was a camera trickery rather than an actual.
Because they presented that as live, didn't they? They said
exactly.
It's actually happening right now.
And the lottery one as well, I believe. They did something like that. So that's where he muddies the water and stuff like that. So it's difficult to know, and it's very difficult to know whether it's to what degree it is entertainment.
Well, he is a fascinating character to me, and obviously a great showman and entertainer, as evidenced by anyone that's ever seen him out of character. You know, if you see him just being interviewed and he's himself, not Derren Brown the showman, but just the guy, he's a very, very different character to the one you see on stage. And he's never made any secret of the fact that what he does is all an act, and he's quite open about that. And he's also known for being an atheist and a Richard Dawkins fan. He says there's no such thing as the paranormal or the supernatural. Everything he does can be explained logically. And it just makes me wonder whether he really believes that, or if that's some kind of deceit, or some part of the act.
Who cares what he thinks? He's entitled to his beliefs and stuff like that. Like, I'd never be so arrogant as to say I definitely know this does or does not exist. So, who knows? Like, it's a tricky thing, but that's the whole point. That's kind of the it's a Bernaysian thing, really. He's presenting a character on television because he's got to have that sort of authoritarian third-party advocate. You've got to believe his identity. You've got to believe that he's the sort of person that could do this sort of thing. Otherwise, he won't be as effective. And that's partly showmanship, and that's partly to do with some of the techniques that he uses. The sort of NLP and the hypnosis stuff like that, because he's got to project confidence. In order to make it work, essentially. I mean, again, it's really strange. It's like the plausible deniability thing that you did, because a lot of the stuff they does, the getting people to confess to murders, the getting people to rob a bank, and the Sirhan experiment. This is the point where it comes about the mudding of the waters, because is that showing you that yes, this can be done? I mean, the police thing, that's not uncommon. That's particularly in third world countries and stuff like that. They'll combine it with beating you up, obviously, but there's been innumerate cases where people have confessed to crimes that they haven't done for whatever reason.
Well, you brought up you brought up the Sirhan thing, and my main reason for bringing up Derren Brown was because I wanted to get onto this program that he did investigating mind control, and it actually touched on MK Ultra by name, and it suggested that it was a CIA-sponsored project. This is something being put out prime time on Channel 4.
Well, I mean, that's something true.
Not something you hear often on mainstream TV. And it included footage of Sirhan claiming that he had no memory of shooting Bobby Kennedy at all. To this day, he just doesn't know what happened to him.
He thought he was at shooting range, apparently.
Yeah, and the program ended up giving the viewer the idea that MK Ultra mind control is very real. That's probably what was done to Sirhan and any number of others, and it ended up presenting a pretty plausible case for the idea of mind controlled assassins, and that to me was an incredible thing to see on mainstream TV.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's what was so interesting about it. I mean, just to sort of clarify, MK Ultra is real. It's an admitted project. There was 149 sub-projects. It was later renamed MK Search. There were other MK Naomi, MK Delta, MK QK Hilltop, MK Chickwit, MK Derby Hat, Artichoke, Chatter, and Bluebird all preceded it. These are all real projects, and one of the points of this was to create what could be called as the Manchurian candidate or a mind-controlled assassin, and there were numerous methods that they experimented with, and there were actually numerous methods which were provably successful. And the second point that I want to make is that basically Sirhan was under hypnosis. I don't believe he was the person that did shoot Robert Kennedy. And I mean, certainly this. I forget who wrote the book. It's a very good book called The Assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, and I can't remember who wrote it. But people should look it up. And they postulate in that basically it was a hypnotist called oh god, I'm forgetting everything. Joseph Bryan. Let me just try and find it actually. Joseph Bryan Jr. I think was the William Joseph Bryan Jr. Sorry, and he was basically the head of the American Psychiatric or Hypnosis Association at the time, and they postulate in this book that basically he was the person that actually programmed Sirhan, and what's certainly true was examined by a lot of hypnotists after the fact. Heiss and Spiegel were the two famous ones that actually examined him, and they all concluded that he was in a hypnotic trance at the time, and he exhibited certain things that aren't normal. He was incredibly strong and seemingly impervious to pain. Like, he's a very tiny guy, and it took about 8 people to wrestle him to the ground. And he also had the uncanny ability to basically tell the time accurate to the second with no access to a watch.
Wow.
which is the sort of thing that you might see in sort of stage hypnotism or something like that.
Yeah, really.
But the point about the Darren Brown thing is, now it's in the milieu of, or in the arena of entertainment. So it's one of these strange things where it basically says, yeah, of course that's real. We've told you about that. We've never denied it. But at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, of course Darren Brown made that happen, in the same way that David Copperfield flew. Like, it's an illusion, Neil. Grow up. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, it can't really be done.
Yeah, can you not tell the difference between reality? And it's this meshing of things that basically causes this confusion, really.
Properly messing with your mind.
And
it's been going on forever.
Yeah.
All right, Neil. Well, as we start to wrap things up then, are there any upcoming talks or media appearances you'd like to plug? And also, just give a quick mention for your books and details of where people can get hold of those and find further information about your work.
Sure. Well, I'm appearing at a couple of Truth Juice venues in the future. Truth Juice Hull and Truth Juice Leicester. So go on their websites and their Facebook pages and check it out. If anyone wants to get hold of my books, it's Your Thoughts Not Your Own, volumes 1 and 2. Volume 1 it's sort of nuts and bolts of MK Ultra and Tavistock and Manchurian Candidates and hypnosis and different doctors involved and assassins and spies and serial killers and all of this sort of stuff. So it covers quite a lot. And the second one talks about social control and the use of the media, the use of the entertainment industry, the use of the film industry, and then it sort of rounds up talking about the LSD explosion in the 60s in Haight-Ashbury and the sort of connections to the military and MK Ultra that has. If anybody wants to get them or just see any other videos and stuff that I've done or radio shows, you can go to my website, which is neilsandersmindcontrol.com, and I also have a Facebook page which I update daily. I'm usually on there basically ranting about something. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me through that, or if they'd like to like the page, that would be very much appreciated. And so yeah, you can get in touch with me like that.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for coming on today. It's been a trip.